Hi, boys and girls. Today's focus question is, what does half past an hour mean and what does it look like on the clock? Before we get started on our focus question, we're going to review some of the features on an analog clock. On an analog clock, there are two hands. The smaller hand represents the hour and the longer hand represents the minutes. And I learned that when the minute hand points to the number 12, it represents o'clock. What time is on this analog clock? That's right. The hour hand is pointing to 5, the 12, and the minute hand is pointing to 12, which means it is 5 o'clock. And if you notice on the digital clock, our 5 represents the hour and our 00 represents the minutes, which is o'clock. Let's try one more. What time is on this clock? That's right. It is 9 o'clock. Our hand is pointing to 9, and again, the minute hand is pointing to 12, which is o'clock. Now, using that information, we're going to continue working on this clock. And I want you to think about this clock. What shape does it remind you of? Because to me, it reminds me of a whole circle. And when looking at it, I want to make sure I remember about a whole circle because I'm going to ask you a question in a minute. But before I get there, I wanted to ask myself, what else can I notice about this clock that I haven't learned yet? Well, if I know that if the minute hand points to the 12, it's o'clock, I'm wondering what happens when the minute hand points to a different number around the clock. And then I got to thinking, if I were to count the spaces in between these lines from the number 12 to 1, there is 5 spaces, which is equal to 5 minutes. So that means that if my minute hand falls on the 1, it represents 5 minutes. And if I kept going, the 2 represents 10, and I kept going, the 3 represents 15, and then the 420, and then I noticed a pattern of 5. So I was like, let me keep counting. 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and 60. And I stopped. So boys and girls, if I went around the clock, it showed 60 minutes. That's one new information I learned. Using that information, I want you to think, what do you notice and what do you wonder about the following information? What time is on the clock? That's right. If you said it is 1 o'clock, you are correct. Now watch me change this 1 o'clock to something different. What do you notice happened? That's right. Our minute hand went from pointing to the 12 all the way to pointing to the 6. And if I remember, our 6 represents 30 minutes when the minute hand is pointing to it. And I noticed that our hour hand, boys and girls, went from the 1 to the middle of 1 and 2, halfway into it. So my minute hand went from top all the way to the bottom, which made me start thinking of my circle again. And the reason it made me start thinking about the circle, boys and girls, is because when we did shapes and we cut our shape in half to 2 equal parts like this, it put a picture in my head of this clock. This half in our circle looks exactly like the half in the clock when it went from the top to the bottom. So if this is half a circle, this represents half past the hour. Because remember, we started at 1 o'clock. So if we went all the way down, it is half past 1 o'clock. So again, half past an hour is 30 minutes. Let's practice this one. What time do you notice on the clock? That's right. Our hour hand is pointing in between 10 and 11. And our minute hand is pointing to 6, which represents 30. So that means that it is half past 10 o'clock. Or in a digital clock, it is 10:30. Let's try one more. What time is on the clock? That's right. The hour hand is pointing in between 8 and 9. So it makes it 8. And then our minute hand is pointing to the 6, which is half or 30 minutes. So it is half past 8 o'clock, or it is 8:30. Now, boys and girls, I hope today's focus on half past an hour helped you with our clock today. I will see everyone on the next one.